Anyway, what I'm going to do is talk about building your brand. I call it building your brand of gold. And a lot of people have talked, you hear an awful lot today about personal branding and building your brand and all of that. And here we go from the oracle of all that's true, Wikipedia, right? Personal branding, they say once upon a time it was self-improvement, now it's all about self-packaging. And people are telling you all the time, you've got to have this great personal brand. But I feel that it's on a kind of a superficial level that it's being talked about. And really what people are talking about is your digital brand, right? And your digital brand is important, but I want to go a little deeper. So today, your digital brand, like people can find you on Google, they can find you on Twitter, they can find you on LinkedIn, on Facebook, etc. And that's what I call the seen world. That's where they can actually see you, right? And you have control over what they see, right? Because you're the one who updates your LinkedIn, you're the one who decides what to put out on Facebook, etc. But it's really the other part, it's the unseen world that really counts. It's what are people who view you, what are they actually saying about you? People who've actually met you, people who know people in your network. It's always said, like, it's more important what people say about you when you're out of the room than what they say to you when you're in the room, right? So that's where I think you've got to go beyond just the digital, and you've got to look at the totality of your brand as a salesperson and what you're communicating about yourself. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. You saw a moment ago, Nicholas brought up the concept of network selling. And this is where I think your brand is really created, is all of these different elements coming together. And that's what I'm going to talk about briefly today, is how you can bring all of these elements together to create a brand as a salesperson that's really going to stand out and differentiate you. So your first impression, sure, your first impression is not nowadays, it's often a digital one. There was a time when, as a salesperson engaged with a customer or a prospect, the prospect would want to know a lot about the company, which is natural. But nowadays, the first thing a prospect does is when Joe calls them, right, is they Google Joe or they go on LinkedIn and say, who is this Joe guy, right? So having a digital brand is important. So your LinkedIn profile is important. When they Google you and messages come up about you, they credential you, that's important. So you need to pay attention. You also need to be careful too. You need to be aware as a salesperson, what is there out on the internet about you? You may have been the top salesperson last year and won the trip to Hawaii, right? But the pictures of you hanging off the front of the boat with a cocktail in one hand and your partner of choice in the other, is that really the one you want to put out about yourself? So, you really need to start thinking about what your global or what your digital brand communicates about you. It should be credentialing. Your LinkedIn profile should tell about who you are. And we've had a couple of people speak recently at these power breakfasts talking about your LinkedIn profile. So I'd encourage you to go to SalesPOP magazine, online, salespop.pipeliner.com, and you'll see that. And as I said, when people search on you, what comes up? Have you done blogs? Have you spoken? Are there things that credential you as a salesperson? And we had a lot in the last cycle, presidential cycle, etc. We had a lot in the last 6 months about fake news. And what you don't need to do is to fake who you are, because I think that's disingenuous. And there is a tendency nowadays, people will go online and they can find services where, oh, I'll write a blog for you. And that's fine. Not everybody's a good writer. As long as the ideas come from you, that's okay. But where it's not okay is where you go and get somebody to write a blog post for you and you publish it pretending that you're an expert on something. Because I don't think that serves you, because that's disingenuous. It's not honest. The brand you're putting out is not true. So enough with the fake news. You don't need to contribute to that with your digital branding. Your second impression is often when you actually connect or you reach out to somebody, and it's often done through email, right? And I picked this is a very recent one. Somebody asked me for connection on LinkedIn and they seemed like a reasonable person, so I went ahead and said fine. I accepted the connection, and this is what I got back immediately. First of all, hey John. Hey John. This is from somebody I don't know, right? And then, nice to connect with you and good to see you as a business strategist with lots of experience, smiley face, right? I mean, what even does that mean? I don't even know what that means. Like, good to see you as a business strategist with lots of experience, smiley face. Is that a good thing? Is that sarcasm? I don't know. I don't know this person. But what I do know is that they immediately took a one-way trip to my trash bin, right? Because here's the thing is like, I don't know this person. Why is this person sending me an email that's over familiar with smiley faces and everything in a business email? It makes no sense. And so you've heard the phrase before. My mother back in Ireland still says it, hay is for horses, right? So what I'm saying today is be careful about your initial contact with people. And I know we live in a world that celebrates informality and acronyms. And now, my son, when he texts his friends and that, I mean, there's no words in it. It's all like IKR. I know, right? All this kind of stuff. So, but don't let it translate and bleed over into business because, your initial contact should say something about you. And so if it's over familiar, if it's bad grammar, all of this thing, I mean, what kind of impression are you making? There's a great book that I encourage people to look at. It's called, it's the Zero Tolerance Approach to Punctuation. So there's two pandas you can see. One panda eats, shoots, and leaves. And the other panda eats, shoots, and leaves, right? So the first one is a big gangster, and the second one is just doing what pandas do. But you can see, how do you want to stand out? Do you want to stand out as somebody who puts a little thought into it, or do you want to stand out as somebody who just writes, hey, smiley face, I don't know you, but I'm going to put smiley faces, and I'm not going to bother with grammar or anything. Let's eat grandma. It's great. There used to be T-shirts of this in the airport. I'm so sorry I never got one because it's great. Again, what does that communicate if you send a message to somebody that has no thought, you haven't reviewed? I mean, get somebody else to review it, but that's your second impression. Because I firmly believe you'll never lose a deal or a contact through being too polite, right? You will never leave it to too polite, too thoughtful, or too respectful. Once you get to know somebody and they give you permission to be informal, that's fine. But from the start, spend a little time. Your second impression should communicate that you actually have respect for the person who's receiving your message. Third impression, when you actually get to talk to somebody, what do you actually know about the business of business and their business? Once upon a time, a lot of salespeople used to celebrate the fact that they didn't really know how business worked. They were sales. I'm a sales guy. I just sell. That's the business over there. I don't know about that. I'm just a sales guy. You can't get away with that anymore. I had salespeople who worked for me who were proud of the fact that they had no idea what was happening below the line. And that's in a profit and loss context, just in case you're wondering. I mean, below the line on a profit and loss statement, that they were all, we're about revenue. And when you would call them in and say, hang on a second, that deal you just sold, we've lost money on it. And they're like, huh? And you go, yeah, the cost of selling outweighs what you, and they'd be all proud. Oh, it was a fantastic deal I did. You say, but you didn't pay any attention to the cost of it, right? And I don't think you can get away with that anymore. So when you connect with somebody as a salesperson, you need to know about business and you need to know about the business of your prospect. And it's an easy thing to do if you're prepared to put some work in. It's just a little bit of homework. For instance, if you are selling into the printing industry, there's printing periodicals, industry periodicals, websites. Now, yes, reading Print Week, despite its lovely cover, is probably not the most exciting thing to do. But if you spend a little time and you actually read about the industry you're selling into, you can often discover that there's a lingo that they use. There are particular words that they use. There are particular hot issues in the industry. So again, doing that homework means that you can engage on a better level with the person, using Google Alerts to make sure that you put in, if there's news about that industry or about the companies, that you're up to date on it. And here's something that's really easy, but a lot of people overlook, is if I'm going to sell into the printing industry, probably I should go through my network and see if there's anybody I know or anybody that they know who's involved in the printing industry. So maybe I could even reach out to them and get educated a little bit about what the hot button issues are there. So again, you will credential yourself on the homework you have done on trying to understand the industry and the challenges of the companies that you sell into. And so your fourth impression, empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of the buyer. And I did a panel discussion a few weeks ago where this issue of empathy came up. And I think people today still confuse empathy with sympathy, because one of the discussions was, oh, you don't want to get too much on the side of the buyer because, then you might, start to sympathize with their issues and actually, slow down the sale. Well, here's the thing, is you can put yourself in the shoes of the buyer and you can understand what they're going through. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it, and it doesn't mean that you should say, oh, I understand that we should slow everything down. Empathizing is really putting yourself in their shoes and understanding what's going on and the implications of what's going on, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to agree with slowing down or whatever. So sympathy, empathy are very different things. And here's the thing about B2B purchasing decisions, right? In a business to consumer purchasing decision, so if I go out on my way home today and I stop at a Best Buy and I buy one of those, have you seen these like curved TVs, those? I don't know what that's all about, but they're obviously the newest and the most expensive. So if I go in and buy one of those and I go home, what's the worst that can happen to me on that buying decision? I mean, I can get hit over the head with it by my wife because she would have preferred to spend that $5,000 on something else, right? But beyond that, there's no real implication to it. In business to business, there is, and this is why you need to be empathetic, right? Because say, for instance, if I bring Pipeliner into my organization and it's a great success, which it would be, obviously, and it helps the organization and it helps the revenue, that can be a career-enhancing thing for me. On the other side, if I bring in a different CRM from a competitor and it's a disaster, which it would likely be, right? It can actually be a career-limiting thing. So there is actually, the buyers, the people you're working with have quite a lot, riding on these decisions. And I think that's where you have to be empathetic about that making B2B buying decisions can be quite stressful. So your fifth impression, trust. Research has shown that trust plays a big part in buying decisions. It plays an even bigger part in somebody being a repeat customer and renewing, and a huge and the biggest part in somebody actually being an advocate for you. You're not going to refer an organization, a vendor, unless you really trust them. And there are ways you can develop trust and there are ways you can kill it. Here's one of the biggest trust killers for a salesperson. Chameleons are great, right? They're really fun little reptiles. I know somebody who has one, and it's really fun to put it beside different colors and watch it change color. Not so good for a salesperson. You need to be consistent, be the same person you are. It's still burned into my memory is when I first came over to the States and I could afford my first nice car, and I went to get a Saab, right? And this was a big deal for me because my boss back in Ireland used to have a Saab. So for me, this was like, now I'm on that level. And the sales guy was fantastic, did great. He was wonderful. He followed up and he was brilliant and everything. I bought the Saab. A few days later, I had a problem with it. There was a rattle in it and I called up. What did he do? He just said, I'll put you through to service. And it was a completely different person. And when service couldn't deal with it, and I came back to him again, he just sent me back to service. So chameleon, right? Completely different person. So trust killer, right? So be consistent. Be honest, right? Sometimes in a sales situation, I know you want to get the deal done and everything, but there are times, sometimes, there are hard truths that you have to face up to, or things that you have to say. It's much better to be honest because you'll be respected in the long run. So honesty is key. And then follow through. I love this one. Tomorrow is a mystical land where 99% of all human productivity, motivation, and achievement is stored, right? So follow through quickly, follow up, because that's the other thing. There's nothing worse than leaving somebody hanging. So the other thing about creating trust is the value that you bring to any sales engagement. And when I was at Huthwaite that Nicholas spoke about, we used to talk about there are 4 value drivers that you can bring to a sales engagement that will elevate you above any other salesperson. The first is where you, through your conversation, you actually help the buyer uncover an unrecognized problem. Something that they may have brought you in. Maybe they brought you in to solve an issue about forecasting, right? And when you go through that conversation, you say, yes, forecasting is an issue, but you actually also have a problem over here with your sales process. Oh, I didn't realize that. You've just brought huge value. You haven't even sold anything yet, and you've already brought value to the equation. Unanticipated solution. Again, you create a solution like you're saying, okay, Pipeliner, yes, it can help you with your sales process. And they talk about, well, we have an account management process too. And you go, well, did you know you can put that into Pipeliner as well and track that? Wow, I didn't realize that. Unanticipated solution. Unseen opportunity, same thing. You create an opportunity for them. And the last one is broker of capabilities. That, for instance, maybe during that conversation they say, you know, we what do you do about proposals? You know, we want to do customized proposals. And you say, well, actually, we have a partner who does that. And you bring in your partner. So these are ways that during a sales process that you can create value before you've ever sold anything to them, and you've already now become a valuable, trusted partner for them. And finally, the 6th impression. The ultimate deal should allow both sides to feel like they won. So it's never good when a buyer feels that they got ripped off, like buy one, get one ripped off. But neither is it good for the seller to feel like the buyer ripped them off. And we've all been in that situation where you've reached an agreement with the buyer, and then at the last minute they go, yeah, you know, if you could just give me another 5%, maybe I could get this done, because they know it's the end of your month or quarter or whatever. And that just leaves a bad feeling on both sides. So it should be a win-win. And Nicholas always says this very good, is that when you do a deal with somebody, both sides should feel like, yeah, I had to give up a little bit. There's a little bit of pain on either side. But once it's shared and it's mutual, that's fine. And finally, just a bonus impression. If both sides in the process act with integrity and all of the things I talked about, why shouldn't the buying selling experience be an enjoyable one? We have created it to be this horrible experience because either, you know, the salesperson or the buyer are so suspicious of one another, whatever, but it shouldn't be like that. It should be an enjoyable experience, and it can be an enjoyable experience. And that's why we believe that if you do what I just talked about, if you make sure, yes, your digital presence online, make sure it's the strongest and most credentialing it can be. Spend a little time when you're reaching out to people with written communications or voicemail. Spend a little time to make sure that they are well thought out, that they're respectful, and you're not going, hey, smiley face, that you're actually being respectful to somebody who you don't know yet. When you engage with them, make sure you know something about their business, something about the business that they're in, and also that you can speak about business in general. And then make sure also that you can build trust in the relationship, right? Trust, be consistent, be honest, follow up. And then in the deals, make sure the deals are win-win and that you're looking to create the best deal possible so both of you can smile at the end of it and say, yeah, this was good for both of us.